At the end of the day, for me, it boils down D4. My experience at launch, it was like nostalgia, cinematics. When it comes to Path of Exile, everything else.
All right, Sean. Diablo 4 or this game, enjoyment level comparing like when you first started playing D4 to this game. How does it compare?
It is more visually appealing. I find that there's way more depth to this game already in terms of like mob variety. The map feels more immersive, like actual like, you know, I remember people being like, oh, the blood in this like little room is just such a homage back to Diablo. It's like, nah, bro, like this is like, this gives me Act 2 vibes, you know, like the graphics, the ambiance, the one that's in Act 1, it was the castle or whatever, that was giving me like way more Ogham Manor. That was giving me way more like, you know, cathedral vibes and all that jazz. Yeah, just overall, man, like the ambiance of this game is great. The class customizability is really cool. The way that you can build your own skills, mix and match, you can hybrid classes, you can power them up with support gems. You know, if you have gear, you can kind of infuse augmentations into them to make them better, give them more affixes, those types of things, which is really cool from a customizability option. Like D4 was just basically you're hunting legendaries for the powers, enchanting them and putting them into gear. So it was like everything was just boiled down to that, where this gives me more of that D2 itemization vibe where like the affixes play into huge play. I mean, again, it's going to change a lot going end game, but even so, it's, I don't know, I just feel like I got more options in my character. These charms are kind of a cool thing. This sapphire charm really helped me on the final act boss in Act 1. The amount of like binds that you get, you know, you get QWERT, you get the mouse buttons with the middle mouse as well, and then you hold control and you got a whole new wave of them. That's way more options than what was in D4. I think at the end of the day, for me, it boils down D4. My experience at launch, it was like nostalgia, cinematics. When it comes to Path of Exile, everything else. It's way more interesting. The graphics are so insane. I just got a new monitor too. So like it just looks fantastic. Like all of the color ranges, just the magic. I just love slinging magic, and it's been really enjoyable so far. The boss fights are insane. Like, you know, the boss mechanics are really fun. Visually, graphically, it looks amazing. Mechanically, you have to actually like be paying attention to the move sets. You know, you have to be dodging at the right times. If so, there's a small window in the dodge that you're kind of like a Dark Souls immunity, but towards the end of that dodge or that roll, you're susceptible to damage. So that timing of the dodge is pretty much everything when it comes to like some of those boss fights. And you know, there's a lot of visual things happening on the screen, you know, something like this, for instance. And so if there's something coming up underneath that, you might not see that. So you really have to pay attention to the visual cues. And once you can kind of like visually take out all of your own things, you can start to see what's out of the ordinary and then look out for that in those types of fights. But yeah, really cool visually. The boss fights are super fun. Class itemization is really neat. All the different ways that you can build up your actual gems and then infuse them with supports. And then not to mention the gear and the way that you can augment them. So yeah, it's pretty sick.
Is it overwhelming, like knowing before, like how you thought it was, and like just taking a look at like all the skills and stuff and attributes and stuff that you can do? Is it now overwhelming still from before you looked at it to now?
I think when it comes to like ARPGs, it's like most ARPGs kind of boil down to like you being able to do like 90% of the content just willy-nilly, just winging it, and then it's like that end game curve, those pushes for those dungeons or maps or whatever else. That's where the actual fine-tuning of a build comes into play. So I think on the outside looking into this, you look at this tree and you're like, oh my god, this is so much. And that's how I felt. But I was like, you know what, I looked up nothing. I'm just gonna go in there and I'm gonna wing it. Depending on your class, you start in a certain wing, and you can travel into other wings, but it may not make sense for your overall build. at the end of the day, if you don't like a direction that you're going, you can just, you know, respec. A little bit of gold, you can remove nodes and rebuild out your path line. So although there's all of these nodes, you might not, you know, you're not going to touch majority of them. You're going to start in a wing, and that's going to be the most relevant to your class. And it's just whether or not you want to dip into maybe some of the close trees or the close wings to get a bit of a hybrid. But that's one of those things that you're probably going to have a build in mind with that type of thing. You know, for me, I'm sorceress. I'm going to go spell damage and cast speed, element, whatever I'm going, overall element damage. I'm going lightning mostly, so that's kind of what I'm focusing on. And then survivability, like you're going to go into maybe some energy shield or something along that line, because eventually the glass cannon starts to have some issues. So we went into pure energy, those types of things. So I think too many people think when they're going into a game that they need to know everything. You know, the one thing that I always say about video games, it's like, especially when a brand new game comes out, man, don't look up stuff, man. I cannot stress, like, maybe I'm an old school gamer, I don't know, but like experiencing a game raw, completely blind for the first playthrough is one of the best gaming experiences that you can have, and you can only have that one time with a game. You can't go back. We can't go back to Diablo 2 and experience that for the first time. We just know things. We know things about it. It's not the same. When it comes to something like this, you know, whether or not you played PoE 1 or not, I didn't. I'm coming into PoE 2 completely fresh, completely noob. I know nothing, looked up nothing. I knew I wanted to do something with casting. Raw dogging it is the most fun experience, just fumbling around. You learn and retain some of why you're making these decisions versus just being told to make these decisions. I know people in, you know, in life might not have a lot of time to sit here and fuck around and figure out different things, but honestly, like, that's for me one of the exciting things about gaming, like figuring it out, experiencing it. And then if I feel like, again, I get down to the end line and I'm starting to push, you know, what PoE calls maps, I still don't know what that looks like or what that means exactly, but when you start pushing maps, if that starts to become an issue, well then, you know, try to reevaluate what you're doing, or yeah, potentially then look it all up and you know, figure out something that's tried and true, and then try that, and then use that concept and apply it into different things. But for me, like, as a brand new Path of Exile player, so far it has not been anything crazy. The only thing I basically watched was like the one stream that Triple G did. They were showcasing like some of the features and whatnot, and half of it was going over my head. I didn't understand majority of the things that were being said, but I saw a quick little snippet of the sorceress casting through a firewall, and it infused that cast as it went through the fire, and I was like, damn, that looks cool, I'm in. And so that's kind of the general concept that I've been going with my build. Flame wall, and then the spark, and then I got orb of storms. Those are my three main things, and then some of the other stuff is just more like util, slowing them down, trying to give myself time to set up my damage, which is basically throwing down an orb into the flame wall and then spamming spark through the flame walls and doing a ton of damage, because when you stand in the orb of storms, it also sends out additional chains, so like a huge dump of damage. You know, I think if you're looking at Path of Exile for the very first time, I mean, just dive into it, man. You're gonna look at all of this passive skill tree. That's what it is, passive skills. So they're not like usable skills. This is just passive things to enhance your overall class. But don't be alarmed, because you're gonna start off in a wing, and you're not gonna start in the north wing and somehow make yourself all the way down here. Like, it's just not probably gonna make sense. Maybe there's a way to do it, I don't know. But honestly, from the looks of it, after diving into it for a little bit here, it's just, you're just kind of winging it, you know. Think about things that you've done in the past with other classes and what makes sense for those types of things. You know, if you're a melee class, you probably want a little bit of survivability, melee-esque things, you know, physical damage, whatever you're going into. If you're a minion, whatever, witch or whatever it is, you know, you're going to be looking at minion stuff and those types of stuff. Auras, things to enhance your minions, things to keep them alive or get more minions in general. Brand new to PoE, and honestly, at first maybe a little visually overwhelming, but as you dive into it, it starts to kind of break down and make sense. So I think, like, people that are looking at Path of Exile, there's going to be a brand new players coming into it in PoE 2. And I think it's overwhelming when people are on the outside looking in, but it looks more visually daunting than anything else. So in addition to like the passive skills and just kind of fumbling along and finding your way, Make sure if there comes a point where you're feeling like you're not too strong or you're struggling with things, make sure that you're utilizing like the Orb of Transmutation. Upgrades a normal item to a magic item. So if you're rocking anything that's like a white piece of gear and you're like, oh, I like something from it, okay, well then you can up that to a magic item, which would then be blue. Here's another one that is a perfect example. So let's say I had a white item, I like the foundation to it, I upgraded it into a magic item. This would then allow me to add another random modifier onto it. It says 2 random modifiers can be had. So if you're looking at this, that already has it. If I go to use it, it doesn't allow me, right? Because it's only 2, it already has 2. I actually have a helmet that can be used. So right here, I only have 1. I like the energy shield. I need a little survivability. Gonna add another one, fire resist. Sure, it's something though, right? So make sure that you utilize them because you get a fair amount of them. Maybe, you know, there's going to obviously be some that are a little bit more rare than others, and you just kind of find that out as time goes on. You know, if you have 18 of something, it's probably a little bit more common than if you only have 1. Be a little bit more smart with the 1 versus the 18. So if you're feeling a little weak, just make sure that you're looking through them. You know, take the time to kind of read some of these tooltips. Make sure that you're utilizing all of that type of stuff because that can be a huge power spike for you. But make sure that you're using your uncut skill gems. Make sure that you're, you know, making sure that your actual spark level or whatever you're using for your casts is up to the highest level that it can, especially if it's your main damage dealer. So like Spark is one of my main damage dealers. I'm making sure that that's the highest. Then Orb of Storms and then Flame Wall. Make sure that you're looking at the uncut gems. Another key thing for you guys to also remember, every single level, the shops refresh. It's very important. So one thing that the devs did say in their Twitch broadcast is that they wanted the shops to actually be viable, not just, you know, you never look at them, they're never relevant, all that sort of fun stuff. So everything that you see in the shops, every time you level, go back and check. There could be something that you really like or want to use or a big power spike. You know, for me, the things that I'm looking for as a caster, I'm looking for like plus skills, looking for, you know, spell damage. I'm looking for maybe energy shield stuff, you know, elemental damage. But, you know, again, just look through these, make sure you're checking them every single level, and maybe you'll find something that you like, +1 to all skill or something along those lines. Like these boots I actually found. These boots I actually found on the vendor themselves. So movement speed, armor and energy shield, fantastic. Maximum life, love it. Increased rarity of items found, so that's magic find, 9%, sick. Intelligence 7, awesome, that's what I'm looking for. And stun threshold. If you're ever curious as to like what something means, so stun threshold, I'm not super familiar with that. I'm gonna hold Alt and then I can bring my mouse up and then it'll give me the tooltip for it. So increases your stun threshold, makes it less likely that being hit by an enemy will stun me. So there you are. Stun, I believe, is a bit of the kind of almost like a hit recovery. Maybe they're different, but you'll notice that sometimes when you get hit, you can't move, and that's kind of what it's referencing. So,
uncut spirit gem. First time seeing that.
So spirit gem, you get from certain things in the different acts, and it'll go down by your mana bar, and you get, I believe, 30 an act is what I heard mumblings of. But the spirit gems are another type of skill, kind of, that you can assign, but they utilize the spirit bar for resource. So you'll have to look at, you know, for me, I went with a Grim Feast. It's a Witch Doctor one. It basically just consumes corpses and puts up an energy shield. And you can right-click it to automatically activate it. It just does it automatic, and it'll use your spirit when you have that available. But I went to go power it up, and that would use another 10 spirit, and apparently it like bricked this skill, so that's something that you need to look after. It's been really, really enjoyable so far. So good job to Triple G coming out with something like this. It's been a good experience.